Hey there, Safepackers. Get your combinations ready because it's time for the Comic Vault, a vault of old comics for you and me and everybody. So anyway, today on the Comic Vault we have Uncanny X-Men, Divided We Stand. That's right. I wanted to make sure I said that correctly so I didn't get caught up in the old saying of Divided We Fall. But Divided We Stand, Uncanny X-Men, collecting issues 495 through 499, written by Ed Brubaker and illustrated by Michael Choi, or however you say his name, Choi. I don't know. Moving on. I've only ever read his name. I've never heard it pronounced. So, this, as the back tells me, is the characters are reeling from the Messiah Complex fallout. And I did not read Messiah Complex, but from this book I understand that a lot of mutants died. So essentially, a lot of mutants died, a few mutants are left, including most of the X-Men. So, what this book does is it's connected to that stuff. There's an initiative of some kind that the cities, or the varying cities throughout the U.S. are trying to adopt, and it has something to do with mutants. That, I don't know. But I'm sorry, I just never read much of the X-Men. But this I found kind of interesting. So essentially, this is an interspersing of two different stories. We have one story where Cyclops and Emma Frost, they go into San Francisco because there is some kind of strange happenings. There are people that there are X-Men that they can't get a hold of, namely Angel and Iceman and Warpath and Hepzibah and whatever. So there's these characters that they cannot get a hold of, they cannot get in contact with, and they find out about this stuff. They're on vacation. They find out that they need to go back and deal with some of these missing people, and so Emma Frost and Cyclops, they go back to the United States from their vacation. And one of the things we learn about Cyclops in this book that I find really interesting is that we've always kind of known that Cyclops is the leader, and one of the reasons why he's a leader, they really outline in this book for a couple pages. And so they're in the Savage Land on vacation, and they're watching these beasts fight, these dinosaurs fight, and Cyclops is watching, and the Emma Frost is looking into his mind and seeing how he's watching these beasts fight. And she is able to look in and see how he's mentating on it. And the character Cyclops is looking at these beasts and looking at their tactics and looking at their approach and how they move and what they're likely to do next, what they ought to do, and then he's looking at himself in the scenario and what his tactics would be to defeat one of them, to defeat both of them. And that's what I find interesting about Cyclops, is that he's a very internalized character, and we don't see him outside of himself very much. So we see a lot of people loving characters like Wolverine, and people that are just bombastic and outside of themselves, and they are just destructive. But then we don't see these people who we don't show necessarily the love for characters like Cyclops, who have more going on internally than what we see externally. And so in that way, I think people are a little taken in by theater of attractions, and what this book does is it kind of shows you what's going on, what's happening to the duck's feet underneath the pond, if you'll follow the metaphor. But so Emma Frost and Cyclops, they go back to the United States. They go to San Francisco, and they find that an X-Men, Martinique Wingard, I think, most powerful of the Mastermind family. And essentially, she has kind of forgotten who she is. She's having some kind of breakdown after the whole Messiah Complex thing happens. And then she is stumbling through San Francisco, runs into some old hippies, and she uses her mental powers to essentially cast a mental projection over a part of a city, and it kind of puts a suggestion into people's heads. So people start shirking their responsibilities. They stop worrying about who they are and what they're doing with their lives, and where they're supposed to be or what they're supposed to be doing based on responsibility. And they focus more on enjoying themselves and slowing life down to a crawl, and enjoying the whole hippie-esque lifestyle, the whole commune-like thing. So all of these people that had this idea put in their heads, not the least of which being the people who were the old hippies who tried to help Martinique when she looked like she was in distress, they're kind of kept in the fold. They get to keep their minds. They just get the projection of being young and being part of the whole free love generation and all that hoo-ha. So Martinique is now getting other people, making them forget who they are and making them believe in their hippie names. And what's really interesting to me is that there is a page in here where Martinique essentially decides that she needs to have some kind of combatants against the invading X-Men, i.e. Emma Frost and Cyclops. So she sends the X-Men that she has under her thrall. She sends them to defeat the invading X-Men, and they give them hippie names, which I find hilarious. So there's Rising Sun, who is Warpath. There's Frosty, who is Iceman. Lady Kitten, Hepzibah, and Angel, who is Angel. So that is hilarious to me, and that in itself made this book worth reading to me. So they'll show like important characters getting there, or at least characters that become important, kind of losing their sense of self and getting wrapped up in this idea of this little miniature hippie nation inside the city limits of San Francisco. So Cyclops and Emma Frost. I keep wanting to say Emma Storm. I have no idea why I keep wanting to do that. Anyway, Emma Frost and Cyclops, they go into San Francisco and deal with the problem. It's more about finding out what the problem is and kind of walking through this weird hippie San Francisco area and thinking to themselves, this is odd. We need to find our friends. And then essentially they manage to defeat this, or at least they break the concentration of Martinique. And she starts to gain her memory back and realize what's going on. She loses the control of everybody and she goes off on her own. And then Emma Frost gets in the face of one of these hippies that had initially tried to help Martinique and blames him and his friends for essentially abusing the powers of this wayward mutant. And the guy says it wasn't supposed to be that way. You know, no, it was her. She did this. It wasn't supposed to be us imposing upon her. Which, inside the book, I find it kind of short-sighted or even judgmental of Emma Frost to say that stuff about these people, because they stopped to help this woman, Martinique, and throughout the book they kind of idolize her. They idealize her. They call her goddess, and they say that she is somebody who is helping everybody and is a wonderful person. And you know what? There is a lot of love going along. And you know what? I've always kind of thought when you look at something like this, if everybody loves everybody, is it actually true love, or is it kind of a falsehood to it? And especially in this scenario, because it's imposed upon them by an extremely powerful mutant, psychic mutant. So I found it interesting, and I think it was a good choice in this book to show that even a person who has mental powers, psychic powers like Emma Frost, can be judgmental and short-sighted and not use her powers of observation, but can rather just say, you know, you're not one of us, so obviously it's your fault. You took advantage of this. She didn't get it from her mind. She wasn't around during that generation, so obviously it has to be you. And the characters they feel bad, and they can't decide as to whether or not it was actually their fault, or if it was partly, in some respects, Martinique's fault. So I really enjoyed the culmination there. And the ride to the end of this little story was kind of fun. It was entertaining, so I would recommend that section of this book. But really that's about half. So where this little San Francisco thing wraps up is that one of the people who become under the thrall of Martinique is the mayor of San Francisco. And the mayor, after she regains her consciousness, or her sense of self, and realizes where she is and what's going on, she becomes immediately in danger, and one of the X-Men, Angel, saves her. And so it ends with the mayor of San Francisco deciding not to join the initiative that was in place after the fallout that happens with the Messiah complex. So the other half of this book is Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Colossus going to Russia and essentially being blamed for some of this this whole Messiah complex dead mutant thing happening because they managed to keep their powers, and when it was discovered that they were in Russia, the Russian government released troops to go collect them, and long story short, a bunch of action happens and they escape. And so the good stuff that we find here is some camaraderie that builds between the three of these X-Men, and that we find Colossus having to deal with some of his past, seeing this oppressive regime that either is or was in place that still has some control or all control, and they still have a lot of resources that can capture these three extremely powerful X-Men. And so they manage to escape. They defeat a bunch of bad guys. Omega Red's tossed in the mix, and they ultimately win. So it's exciting. It's kind of fun. But largely the big story that is in this, in my opinion, is the San Francisco stuff with this hippie stuff. And I find it kind of interesting. It's a nice, chill ride to find Cyclops is he has to look inside of himself, and he has to look inside of how he can strategize and not hurt his friends, because he knows that he shouldn't hurt them. And it's also interesting to watch somebody not understand herself or a situation, even though she's psychic. And I suppose you could call that a discrepancy, or a maybe it's a little hard to swallow, or a contrivance. But I think that it's the emotional state of a psychic is an interesting thing to delve into, because they can use their powers or they cannot use their powers. They can choose to or to not. So ultimately what happens is that these characters are subject to folly regardless of what their powers allow them. You know, ultimate access to any information you want does not necessarily mean that you digest it in the way that it ought to be digested. And had she really done that, she would have looked at the situation as being kind of an unfortunate happenstance rather than the fault of humans. So, that being said, I do actually recommend this book, Divided We Fall. I thought it, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure it's terribly important for the overarching continuity that was going on at this point in time, circa 2000 and whatever. This was published in 2008. So, but I do recommend this book. It's interesting, it's fun, it's a lot of fun to read. So I thank the viewer that sent us this. This is one of our mailbag day finds that somebody sent us, so greatly appreciate it. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So thank you guys. And check out Uncanny X-Men Divided We Fall by Brubaker and Choi. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching the Comic Vault, and we'll catch you next time.